Let me talk for the last couple of minutes about what we can do about this now. So one of my arguments, as you probably have picked up when you think about kind of the marijuana decriminalization story, one of my arguments is that the way this system was built was with a series of small steps by many different actors across the country, 50 states in the District of Columbia and the federal government, 3,000 counties, police officers, prosecutors, judges, legislators, probation and parole officers. If everybody gets a little bit tougher in their individual domain, a little bit less caring, a little bit less sympathetic, a little bit more likely to lock people up, if everybody does that, and we do it over 50 states and 3,000 counties in over 40 years, we get the system that we have now. We never had an up or down vote in this country. There was never a moment, certainly in the black communities, but even nationally, where somebody said, hey, mass incarceration, yes or no? Want to be the world's largest jailer? Want to lock up more people than Stalin's Russia, yes or no? I suspect if the question had been asked, and I know if it had been asked in black communities, that the answer to that question would have been no. But that's not how it got phrased, because that's not how the system got built. So then what does that mean for us today? It means we're going to have to unwind the system in the same step-by-step way through small micro acts for which all of us are responsible. And we're going to have to do it together. So let me give you a few kind of examples of things that can be done. In the criminal justice arena directly, if you care about this issue, the most important thing you can do is make sure that in your community you have a prosecutor, you elect a prosecutor who is progressive, who cares about these issues. That happened last November. I'm not going to speak to the Cleveland election because I know there's differences of opinion about that. But I will say nationally, for the first time in my lifetime, a slate of progressive prosecutors nationally got elected. They were elected on claims that we lock up too many people, the war on drugs has gone too far, wrongful convictions are a problem. This happened in Florida, it happened in Alabama, it happened in Texas, it happened in Denver, it happened in Chicago. Local prosecutors have more power over the criminal justice system than any actor, including even the president. So if you care about this issue, figure out what your local where the stance that your local prosecutor is taking. I just got to give you one more example of somebody who won that never in my lifetime would have thought would have ever won. In Texas, a former defense attorney with the words "not guilty" tattooed across his chest ran for prosecutor and won. So we can win these local elections and elect progressive prosecutors who will make a difference. If that guy won in Texas, anybody can win. But it's not just within the criminal justice domain, right? We also have to think about what we can do as individual citizens. So almost everybody here is either an employee or an employer. I talked about how hard it is to get a job when you come out of prison, or come out of jail even. We can change that. Recently, the Ford Foundation, which does amazing work on criminal justice reform, they visited a prison in New York State. And they presented their work. And at the end of the presentation, one of the guys who was prisoner raised his hand and said, excuse me, I'm just curious, when I get out, could I get hired at the Ford Foundation? There was silence. But here, to their credit, and we could all follow this model, they went back, led by Darren Walker, their CEO, and they looked at their HR policies, which in fact made it almost impossible for this person to get hired, to even be considered. They got rid of those exclusions. And more than that, they built an internship program where they specifically go out and recruit and try to bring people in, first as interns and ultimately into paid positions, who have been in the criminal justice system. All of us could do that as employers. As universities, I work at a university, so it's personal to me. Some universities exclude people right off the bat. Others do consider this question of whether you have a record, but they do it much later in the process. not in your initial application, and after they've learned a lot more about you. So it becomes one thing that the university knows about you, not the only thing, and you don't signal to the applicant up front, you might as well not even fill this paper out because you're wasting your time, because if you have a record, you're not going to get accepted. Churches, religious institutions. We have 900,000 people returning from prison and jails nationally every year. We have over 300,000 religious institutions, churches, synagogues, mosques, temples in this country. That means if each of our religious institutions adopted 3 people coming back to our community and said, we're going to help you network, we're going to help you reestablish, we're going to help you get housing, we're going to help you get an ID. When you come out of prison, you can't get anything without an ID in this country. People don't have IDs, not valid ones. They don't take the prison ID. People say, well, it only costs $20. Well, if you don't have any money, $20 is $1 million. You don't have it. So what if you took 3 people through your church who were coming back to your community and said, we are going to be a source of support for you? And one last idea, and this one's kind of personal to me because I was giving these talks and thinking about, well, what could you do? And then I started also to take this upon myself and say, well, what do I do? And I teach at this law school, and I love it. But am I doing enough? So recently I got trained by a program called Inside Out, which trains professors. Anybody here who is a professor or associated with the university can get trained in this program in your area. It doesn't have to be criminal justice. They do it in every topic. They train you on how to teach the class that you already teach at your university in a prison. So last year, I took 10 Yale Law students into a Connecticut State prison to study in a seminar setting along with 10 incarcerated men. We studied the same material that we normally study at Yale. Now we studied it in the prison setting as a group of 20, as equals. Most meaningful teaching I ever did. I don't encourage you to do it for self-interested reasons, but it is true that my evaluations were the best I've ever gotten. But not just that, one of the students who was incarcerated wrote this letter. He said, I appreciated the law that you taught me, but actually the most meaningful thing was that for 2 hours, I sat around a table and people treated me as an intellectual. They treated me as somebody who had ideas, and that's never happened to me in my life. Somebody else wrote, for 2 hours a week, I felt like I wasn't in prison. So there's not going to be a silver bullet. There's not going to be a single piece of legislation. There's not going to be a single executive order that is going to solve this problem. But if we, in our own spheres of influence, in our own domains that we control, if we decide individually and then as a collective that we are going to work for a criminal justice system that's more humane, that's more merciful, that's more fair, that's more compassionate,